Here we go. Here we go. World's greatest dad. World's greatest dad. This is big questions. Big questions. We got big questions. You got big answers.
I think the best way to start this episode is how you said it before we started rolling, which is we're talking about friendship. I got 10 pages of shit.
I do. And I don't even think
That's,
it's enough. This is Welcome to the Big Questions series. This is our series where, we don't know what we're calling it yet. If it's just going to be Little Kids, Big Questions, Bigger World. I don't know. We're the world's greatest dads. This is the World's Greatest Dad podcast. And we're here to kind of just talk about being dads. But, we realize that in our interviews with dads and our chats with each other about pop culture and movies and music and reliving our childhoods and the once booming TV industry, we don't often get to do deep dives into some of the topics that are pretty important, relevant, of which we sometimes think we know how to handle, but don't necessarily have a plan. And we are here to give you that plan based on a decent amount of research. Nobody reads anymore.
I just started. I just started reading again.
No way.
And I blame the Aura ring. I got an Aura ring. People are like, do you have two? Like, no, this is just my recent wedding band because I lost my first one. But this is an Aura ring. And the Aura ring is like, yeah, you need to do better with your sleep. So I literally turn the phone off and I read before bed. And now I'm cruising through books because of my Aura ring.
Oh, it doesn't put you to sleep? That's great.
Yeah, so I am reading.
We should
Go
start a
me.
book club. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm reading
All right.
Heat 2 right now. That just started that one.
Heat 2?
Yeah, Michael Mann wrote a book about basically, yeah, I mean the events surrounding After Heat, and it's like a prequel and a sequel all in one big book.
Well,
They're gonna
that's
make a
great.
movie too. Yeah.
That's really wonderful to hear. And, I'm glad that we're talking about it. It's something we bond over. And that's a big part of friendship is having shared interests. But friendship can also be difficult,
Mm.
no matter your age, even for 40 somethings like us. You think we have it all together, but, we don't always, but we have some wisdom and we want to help our own kids through maybe friendship.
Yeah.
I don't want to say issues, but issues and quandaries and conflict because that's life. So I'm going to share an anecdote about, my daughter came home the other day and said that she was pretty upset with a friend who said that she got invited to a sleepover party that my daughter was not invited to, and that this friend kept bragging and bragging, and it wasn't,
Mm.
it just really hurt her feelings.
Mm.
Of course, it later came out that this girl who was bragging learned that my daughter had a sleepover without her. And so, everyone's just trying to kind of make themselves feel heard, seen, all of the senses, smelled, touched.
Hmm.
I don't know. But no, I think exclusion is something that we deal with our entire lives. It never stops. There are group chats we are not included in to this day. There will constantly, this is never going to end. What can end is handling it poorly. And so I
Yeah,
want
you're
to
right.
ask you, Ollie, what has your experience been? You're, again, a few piano lessons ahead of me with the
Exactly.
old friend group dynamic with your 14-year-old, maybe when he was really little, when he
Yeah.
didn't even have an awareness of it. Because I will say, like, sometimes my son, I'll watch kind of being excluded, and we're like, does he realize they're kind of being uncool to him? And he's just like, so I think sometimes it kicks in at a later age. But talk about friends and friendship and your experience as a dad.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I'll just go right into Heath because there's been definitely we've had to wade through some interesting waters, and it's still unfolding a little bit. And even on a recent episode, I mentioned how he is now just starting the second half of eighth grade, possibly going to a new high school, and one of the dynamics about that is him being around a new set of people. So when you talk about friendships with Heath, a big thing is that, we moved here when he was 3. So whatever relationships he had before, let's be honest, 0 to 3, they don't really count, right? And so, his friendships are certainly here. And the fact that he's been at one school from kindergarten now through eighth grade means his friendships are really built around this one specific community, which is small, which is pretty affluent and is a bit of a bubble. And as he's gotten older, he's certainly realized that there are haves and have nots. And we are surprisingly on the have not side, even though I think we're okay. And that's hard. I mean, when you're a kid and, let alone like, oh, this is like the cool crowd, but just when there's a general expectation and that's tied around wealth, and then on top of that, there are those social hierarchies, which are inescapable. There's a lot of challenges. And perhaps not surprisingly, middle school was a big awakening, a wake up call into new friendship dynamics. He had friendships that did not really continue into middle school. At his school, as the years go on, particularly in sixth grade and ninth grade, a wave of new students come in. So when he was in sixth grade, there were some new students who came in. His friendships started to really grow and develop around the newer kids in sixth grade. And that wasn't necessarily by design. Heath is one of the kids in his class who everybody is friends with him, but the closeness, the proximity of it and circles change and evolve. So in a nutshell, there were friends of his in second grade, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade that kind of moved into different circles in sixth grade. And there were tears. There were times that were just really hard. I think he is kind of learned to accept that, has the friends that he has, and exclusion is kind of a part of it. And to a degree, I think he's realized too, like maybe this group isn't for him per se, or the world that he's in at this school is maybe not exactly the perfect fit. For example, he now does club volleyball and he's with kids from different schools and stuff like that. And that's tremendously eye opening. And I think the big picture, the long view of it is that we can kind of get obsessed with like, oh, why am I not being included or accepted? But it's like, as you know, Neil, there's like 9 billion people on the planet. You can
7.
literally find 9. I got a couple. There's like 2 billion stashed
All right.
in the Gaza tunnels. I went there to go there. Those things are labyrinths. But yeah, it's hard though because I think we're always smited by what we don't have versus what we do have. I mean, that is kind of the ultimate life lesson. So that's my check-in
Yeah.
on all that
Well, that's
and the
good.
2 billion people.
It sounds like your son, as always, wise beyond his years, has kind of dealt with some of the exclusionary tactics, the realities of friendship and just relationships. I mean, it's like how life works. I think that something that I have to check myself and a lot of parents is like that instinct to kind of fix it or explain it away. And this is like anything else. Your kid gets a bad grade, they get hurt, and you want to immediately, of course, go, you're fine, you're fine. Are you okay? What can I do? And just kind of pick them up immediately. And I think, the way that can manifest with friendships and exclusion is like parents saying like, well, maybe they didn't mean it like that, or oh, well, just, go play with someone else, or kind of, or even blaming the other kid, and I think it's like, it's so complicated. These are living, breathing organisms, both the children and the relationships. They're like these living things. They're not static, and so we're going to talk about that a little bit. And so, yeah, so that's the big question today. The big question is, how do we talk to our kids about friendship and exclusion without making it worse?
Yeah. And I gotta tell you, like, it devastated me. Like, it was a real anxiety, fear just about him feeling like he didn't have friends. Like, it's funny, like, he's in a place in a school where it's all pretty idyllic. You know what I mean? Like, you can leave your backpack around, no one's gonna steal it. You know what I mean? People aren't saying like horrifically racist stuff except for that one kid the one time, which is not bad in this current day and age. It's a pretty idyllic place, but I knew the pain. And also it's interesting because obviously my wife and I, we both are dealing with this together. She was popular and I was not. You know what I mean? I had to do a little song and dance to try and get a little attention.
This is a whole side quest we're gonna have to go on, maybe at a later date. But real quick, so Brearley is slumming it with a nerd? Like you're like a
That's
theater kid?
yeah.
Like a
That is literally completely accurate. And if you look at our origin story, where we both met doing children's theater, she was in the high school play as like the high school student, and I was the nerd in middle school. That was my role in Nightmare on
But
Puberty
hold
Street.
on, you
So,
really did theater growing up?
hmm oh yeah, we were both actors. We were both actors, and that's where we met doing educational theater in Los Angeles in the early aughts, like 99 aughts.
But
How
she
about
was a cool kid, and they were like, oh, "You're going to be a star," and you were like, "I want to be a star to avenge my enemies."
yeah, I think they were like, I think you've got to maybe stick to doing the Neil Simon comedies. Like that was my. I know, not so bad really,
Okay.
but yeah. So like, and the thing is too is like he's not nearly in the same shoes I was in.
Hmm.
Like, and the other, it's funny too. Like he's always been pretty. I don't know how this translates, except I understand it because I went to one school for 6 years. I found to a degree the cool kids at my school started all when the school started. You know what I mean? They're like OG, old school from jump. Not everybody was in the cool kid, but it was definitely something that I remember talking to. Like, oh, once a friendship crew gets established, it's hard to like break in. You know what I mean? The circle has been set, and and that was it. And
I
so
Well, I
that was
remember
maybe
I remember how hard it was for a few friends of mine. They moved from Minnesota, they were twins, but they ended up, one of them got involved with the school paper, Brandon and his sister. Well, it became a bit of a love triangle with her and a few of the
I
others.
knew I smelled something was rotten in this entire line of questioning. I just knew it. Minnesota Twins. I was like, wait, is he making a baseball reference? I could tell the lie was coming out.
Wait a second. Is that why they made them from Minnesota? Because the characters were that how clever was that? Aaron
Now we can.
spelling you old so and so.
It's how we built that beautiful mansion, baby.
All right, enough of these 90s references. Back to friendship, big questions. So, okay, it's funny. It's like we've so far, and you might be listening to these out of order, but thus far we've talked about God, religion, death, war, or we have some
Yeah.
other serious topics on the docket. Why friendship? It's just friendship. Well, it's literally the reason we're alive is to cultivate relationship. I mean, I guess survival of the human race, but how do we do that? In communities, by building
Mm,
relationships with each other. And of course, conflict is a natural result of that. And we need to figure out how to handle conflict, especially with the people we love. Hey, it's really, I don't want to say easy, but in some ways it is easier to have conflict with people who you don't really care about or you don't like. But when it's people you care about, it can cut so much deeper. And I think you had alluded to that feeling, that even knowing how much it gutted you to see your son possibly in pain over friendship
yeah.
drama.
Yeah.
It's very easy for someone from the outside to go, you make new friends, but it really hurts. It hurts at any age. But again, I think it's about having those tools, and we, as the dads and the parents in general, can help equip our children with those tools. So, real quick, to that point, why does it hurt? Why does it even hurt? Who cares? You make new friends. All right, well, I want to normalize this for parents. It's okay to feel anxious about your kids' friendships. It's okay to feel overly invested, because who your kid is friends with or not friends with can feel like a referendum on your child.
Hmm.
Oh, they're this or they're that, or that means they're not good at social situations, or it could feel like it's a reflection on your parenting. What did I do wrong that they can't make friends? And so it really kind of goes to like our most base fears and anxieties. The other piece is honestly, it can trigger adult memories. You might think of little nerd Ali Khan, Alexander,
Alex.
kind of just
That was in Alex
finding his
Khan.
way.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'd be in having to eat lunch alone in the bathroom. Who knows? I don't know what you did back there in Missouri.
Never ate in the bathroom. I'll tell you that much. That actually never happened, thankfully.
Hearing about a party that you weren't invited to. I guess today's, for the older crew, maybe you find out, oh, someone got married and I wasn't invited to the wedding. You see the photos online, whatever.
Yeah.
You get kind of kicked out. You think, oh, this group chat hasn't been active for a while. Oh, it's so interesting. And then you hear, oh, yeah, no, they still talk all the time. New group chat. You're not in it, you know. So
Hmm.
it never stops. But again, we need to just kind of recalibrate and know that this is normal. It's normal to be upset. It's normal for it to happen, and we're going to arm ourselves. So that's what we're here to do. That's what the big question is, and this has been a long tee up. But let's define friendship. What do you think friendship is, Ali? What do you think the definition of friendship is?
It's so funny because I feel like a friendship is more defined on what isn't working as a friendship. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like there's a natural state where you want to be social around people, and then you get close to a person and there you go. But then really it's like, do you define a friendship or do you go, what's a good friend? And that's something we talk about, certainly with Heath, like, and we encourage, and like, it's, something that frankly is higher on the list of what our hopes and dreams are for Heath, more so than like grades or athletic achievement. And that is being a good friend. Like, so to me, it's just like, someone who's like, friendship is a mechanism to support someone and receive support, to share love, to receive love, to be kind. That's something Brearley's always said. It's like, we just want you to be kind. We want you to, be kind. I think that's, what it is. It's like, friendship is a way to see the best of humanity, like it's funny. It's like kind of elusive. It's like friendship to me is like, you can define it in some sort of mechanical terms, but to me it's just like, let's talk about when it's good and when it's the best. And it's like, it's something I at times can struggle with, because as you get older and you kind of meet people, and sometimes the friendships come from kind of work environments and things like that. And those aren't the same as like your good close friends or whatever, but friendships, they start with some sort of circumstance, some sort of like initial event, and then boom, there you go. And it's a lot easier when you're like, oh yeah, we met at college or we met in high school, but then, then what happens? Like we met through work, or it's my wife's friend or whatever. But I have definitely found, truthfully, I'd say the big takeaway is like, I don't so much go, what is friendship? To me, it's like, when is a friendship done? And that's what's crazy, because there's one person I'm thinking of. I'm like, oh, we seemed like we were friends, I guess. Not, we never like hung out a lot. And then like, you just hit a spot where you're like, okay, this person's not being cool right now. And then I think about this through the POV of Heath, and I'm like, oh God, like I never want Heath to act like this. Or if he was around someone like this, I wouldn't want him to be friends with him, because I don't think he supports him and stuff. So
Awkward way for you to break up our friendship here on the pod, but
well,
all
Neil,
right.
you're one in a million, as we all
Hey,
know.
so part of me was just, I was gonna be like, wrong. That is not the definition of friendship. So I'll tell you, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, and this is, by the
No.
way, as an English major, this always drove me crazy. You want to know the definition of friendship? The state of being friends. Get out of here with that garbage. You
See, I
can't use
told
the
you.
word in the definition. I know that. No, they have a few versions, but that always bugged me. Friendship is the state of being friends. Well, what's a friend? All right, so it says a state of mutual trust and support between allied nations could be friendship, right? Now we're talking a little bit global. I think we want to.
Allied
That's
nations?
right.
Are you trying to get me to talk about Venezuela? I gotta.
No, 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 please. That may not even be relevant by the time this airs.
There may not be in a Venezuela anymore.
It might be called something else. But here's the thing. So, and I remember hearing this a while ago, and I actually think it's true. But I'm curious your take that, friendship is based on three factors: time spent together. How often are you talking, hanging out? In today's day and age, it could be sending memes, texting all day, but time spent together, shared history. Did you come up together in the same schools, community? Do you share the same joyous memories, traumatic memories, references that no one else gets, just all that stuff? So time spent together, shared history, and this is a big one, and it's kind of more intangible, vulnerability. And this I would define as, and I say this to my wife a lot, there are certain people we're with, you maybe don't spend a lot of time with or even know that well, but you just have that ease where you're like, oh, I can kind of open up. we can sit in silence, or, I don't, and versus sometimes you're with those people who are like, whether you've known them a really long time or they're new to you and you're just like, I feel a little on eggshells. I'm not sure what to say next. It's a little
Mhm.
uncomfortable. And I think if you think about those three things, it's like, in TV and in many industries, they used to say good, fast, cheap. You get two. You can't have something be good, fast, and cheap. I actually think you can have all three. You can have, and if you do, it's a beautiful thing. Someone who you spend a lot of time with, that person who you have a shared history with, and you can really open up. Those are the deepest friendships. And if I'm being honest, I've got some friends from growing up who we have a shared history, and I can be really just my full self with. I mean, they've seen me at my really worst, and hopefully my best too, and have been there for me, and maybe vice versa. But I don't see them, as much as the people I see in my neighborhood who I've met in the last few years, who I really get along with. Some I can open up to, some I don't.
Mhm.
But so I don't know that I have anybody that I can nail all three with, and that's really a hat trick. But that's not guaranteed. But I think if you have two of those, you got a pretty solid friend. One.
Do you think you had more back? Because I mean, here's the other thing too, and I think about this because my son one day, a couple years ago, was like, "Oh, you don't have any friends. You have like two friends." And I think what's happened is he just doesn't see me interact with my peer group because what's kind of funny is like, yeah, like some of my longest, oldest friends, don't live here, and then when you meet fellow dads and stuff like that, it's like, well, we all have our families. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't
Well,
know.
John Mulaney had that great bit, and maybe it's changing about how your father has no friends. You know this bit? Your
No,
mother,
but that sounds perfect.
he
Yeah,
says,
but
your
go on.
mother has friends, and
Yeah.
they have husbands. And sometimes the husbands will, but your father doesn't have any friends. And obviously it's, for comedic effect, a little bit makes it bigger than perhaps the reality. But yeah, I think, for some people, look, I think there are always those people as personalities who like, there's a guy I know who's like, he's like, I play in this softball league, and I'm playing pickup basketball, and I've got these college friends, and then I got this friends on the, and you're like, oh, this is like Mr. Social. I find those people are often hard to pin down, and sometimes a little bit inauthentic. But I think if you have
Mhm.
a few people, look, is it quantity, quality? If you got both, great. But it's interesting because so much of this and so much of everything we talk about is we're putting our own experience, our own habits, patterns, traumas onto our kids, maybe trying to help them not repeat them. But we
Mhm.
have our own that we learned from our parents. I'm curious, what were your dad's friendships like? Did he have friends?
That's so it's really interesting. I think about how generationally different it was and how like sometimes when I kind of like Monday muse, if you will, about my dad and like the things I do with my son versus what he didn't do or engage with me. So much of it is just like the giant divide of how I grew up and how my father grew up. So, I think being an immigrant, coming to America from a vastly different culture, literally and figuratively from the other side of the world. Like, I think his friendships were very much built around a community bond with fellow immigrants of his world. And yeah, like they kind of just were like, the door was shut and the men hung out. You know what I mean? Like it was, and that was pretty much it. I remember, I don't know when it was, maybe call it 15 years ago, I was hanging out with some friends who I essentially grew up with. Our parents were friends. And then I came to realize, like, from one of the kids, and this is someone who I've known since I was like 3 or 4, I guess. He goes, "Oh, yeah, our dads are like best friends." And I did not know that. I didn't know that their dad and my dad were best friends. I mean, I always kind of thought, like, oh, yes, they're friends and they know each other and stuff. But I didn't understand that term, that there was that kind of closeness to it. So, there was no guidance about friendship or any of that stuff as I kind of made my way into it. And also too, it's kind of funny, but I mean, to put it bluntly, like as he would probably say it, like he didn't have, I mean, he wasn't close with American friends. You know what I mean? They were just like the other doctors, basically the other white doctors are just colleagues. You know what I mean? Like maybe they hung out way, way, way back in the day, but not on the weekends, not regularly. Maybe like once a year at some hospital holiday party. You know what I mean? They'd be like, "Oh yeah, it's Doctor Blah blah blah." But yeah, so just vastly different, just a
Mm,
very, very
yeah.
vastly different experience. So like, dealing with Heath and his friendships and offering my advice, like there was nothing passed down for me to go, well, my dad told me this. It was just like, no, I know what it's like to not be well received, and I don't know, and just the difficulty of navigating other people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I had a similar, I guess, model set for me in that, like, my father's friends were always in the past tense, in the sense that they, were stories from college or growing up. And then it kind of ended. And then he knew people, but it always seemed like, oh, well, when I, spent that summer in Chile with, my friend Timmy, and I would always hear these stories, but it was always like, well, there's no new memories being formed. And again, part of that, well, it's a few things. Like you said, it was generational. My parents weren't immigrants, but they were certainly of that boomer generation where it was all about the nuclear family,
mm,
and less about the community around you. And so I think that was a big part of it. And I also, frankly, like this is the double-edged sword of technology. I think a lack of technology didn't enable you to stay in as close touch with people if they were geographically further away. I mean, my wife's best friend for the last 15 or 20 years lives in LA and has for most of that time. And they
mhm,
text all the time, and I think
right.
like if technology was not what it is, maybe they'd see each other once or a year or every couple of years or for a visit, and maybe it would fade up. But like this ability to stay in close contact, a lot of people talk about the downsides of technology and how it can rot our brains, sure, and steal our soul and take all of our attention span away, but it also does keep us in such close contact with people who are not necessarily physically close. So this is all to say, I didn't necessarily know what it was like to have lasting friendships, and I think I'm kind of like figuring it out in real time as an adult. I'm fortunate that I have a few friends I've known since like ninth grade, but it's been, I don't want to say it's work, but like it doesn't, as Matt Ritter talked about, like, it's not set it and forget it. You gotta
Mhm.
you gotta respond. As my wife likes to say, like, you gotta show up. If people invite you and you don't show up, okay. But then they invite you again, you don't show. At some point, the invitations are going to stop, and then you go, "Hey, they don't invite me anymore." Well, yeah, you never went. You have to, you get what you give to some extent. So this is, our experience. But again, this is about the kids. And so let's talk about what friendship actually is and isn't from a little bit more of a scientific perspective. So, according to the experts, friendship is, as we've kind of been saying, it's not fixed, it's not static, it's fluid. It can change. The closeness can change, the groups can change. Friendship is also often contextual, in the sense that, like, you've often heard people say, I have my school friends, or, my home friends, or, oh, that's my basketball friend. That's my dance friend. That's my crossword puzzle friend. That's my religious school friend. And we often put these people in buckets with friendship because of the where we've intersected with them in our lives, right? Friendship
Mhm.
is developmental. It's something that, again, like, is a skill that we learn over time. Nobody comes out, why do we have to tell our kids, you got to be kind, you got to share? Because it's not inherent to us, right? These are behaviors that we have to learn and model. And much like it's fluid, friendship is evolving, and we have to kind of ride that ride, if you will. Friendship is not everyone liking you all the time. You don't have to always like and agree with your friends. Friendship is also not being included all the time. If someone doesn't invite you to a specific thing, doesn't mean you're not friends. It just might mean they didn't have room, or it wasn't the right fit, or, they were trying to keep the group small, or whatever their reason is. It can hurt. You can feel left out, but it doesn't mean that you're not friends. And friendship to that point is also not never feeling left out. You might feel left out. That's okay. That is normal, that is human. I think we often talk, it's become a cliche now. People talk about protecting their peace, and kind of like checking out and doing the self-care. And sometimes that means not taking on the burden of other people's emotional stuff. We want to be there for each other, but you can't be there for everyone all the time. It's just not sustainable. And so, you know, part of it is developing that exterior, helping our kids know that like it feels personal. It may not be as personal as you think it is. Um, and exclusion, as we've said, it's painful, but it's also part of how relationships work. It's part of how our society functions. Again, like there's a capacity number on the door when you walk into a bar in a stadium. Not everybody can get in there, and so, you'll catch the next one.
I'm just picturing you explaining this to your daughter. Like, listen, it's like a stadium. Not everyone can get in. It's funny. A lot of this stuff, like the hurt happens, and you're just like, well, like you just kind of, it's almost like falling off a bike. Like it's inevitable. You know what I mean? Like another child's going to be, mean or act intentionally or unintentionally insensitive to your child, and you're just kind of like, yeah, you can't make someone be friends with you. And then the other crazy truth, the other reality of it is like, people evolve, and it's not even just change, because change can be good, change can be bad, but we evolve. Like, I'm going to be different than this 10 years from now. I don't know what that will be. And, ultimately, those around me will hopefully be part of how I'm evolving, And that's what's kind of crazy about life itself. Ritter was dead on, because I think his whole thing is just like, listen, you've got a family, you're an adult now, but you still need friends. Like, do not ignore yourself. It's almost like really just self-help love. But you gotta put in the work, which is obviously his thing. And even just, I mean, my God, I'm so glad I have a little text thread that I have been keeping up with the last even few weeks over the holidays and stuff like that, just because it grounds and connects me. And the funny thing is, these are two guys that are, I would easily call them among closest friends, quote, best friends, if you will. I didn't even become friends with them until like after college. You know what I mean? Isn't that funny? You almost think like, oh yeah, we go back. We met when we were 6. We rode bikes, and then we were BFFs forever. Yeah, right, dude. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, that's like, especially like if you're someone who like, leaves the town you grew up in, leaves the city you grew up in. I don't know. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah. I did want to make the distinction between exclusion and bullying. I think it's much more serious when someone is being when if you feel like your kid is being targeted versus just excluded. It's a little bit like the federal government defines what pornography is. It's like, I know it when I see it. It's, because how do you know when it's bullying and exclusion? It's they kind of bleed into each other. But I did just want to flag that is something, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, where, you want to step in if you feel like your kid is actually being targeted or bullied. But if it's a little just not being included, that's where we need to kind of provide the tools. So you kind of alluded to it earlier, but I want to talk about a little bit going back your own early friendships and how maybe like positive memories, negative memories, and kind of like what you learned as an elementary school kid, middle school kid, high school kid about making friends, keeping friends, and maybe friends you've lost.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I feel like for me, it was like nothing but a series of mistakes in a way. Like, I mean, I definitely had, friendships and whatnot, but I feel like I got bullied and I did bully, and also like the climate was frankly toxic compared to what's considered normal and acceptable these days on so many levels. It's just wild. And I even remember, Heath even saying like, wait, you were a bully? And I told him like, I was a bully and I got bullied. Like it depended on the situation and whatnot. And it's funny because then you grow up and you essentially become not even just an adult, but like a withered older version of yourself. And you're like, and the person who you thought was the cool kid who was being bullied is often clueless. Like, huh, what? I didn't know that. You know what I mean? I've had that. I remember having this conversation. I was in town in St. Louis, and this is kind of funny because it was like, this is like, throwing a little flex, but like, was probably into 3 seasons of Cheap Eats, and it was like, because of social media, it's like 2017, and I posted I was back in St. Louis. There were people who were like hitting me up, like, "Are you in town? Let's hang out." And I'm like, "Okay, cool." Like, you were like the cool kid from my high school, and maybe I'd see you at Christmas, on a bar at Christmas. You know what I mean? Like, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, cool, let's hang out. And I remember just hanging out with these guys, and we were just talking about whatever old, what happens when you hang out with old high school people? You talk about other old high school people, and they were all part of a tight crew, a cool crew, if you will. And they talked about how this one person they no longer really hang out with or whatever. There was just some sort of, they explained it or whatever, but it was just so funny seeing their POV, as like these, they were like more of these kind of alphas, you know what I mean? And they were like, oh yeah, we just don't really hang out with him or whatever. And and I think about that, and I think about Heath right now and how he could be like, oh yeah, they don't hang out with me, I'm excluded. I'm like, dude, it's just true. Like 15, 20 years from now, no child wants to hear 15 years from now. Let's just get that out of the way.
Just wait until Heath gets his show on Netflix, Brothers, Hulu, CBS, and he's in season 3 and comes back to Austin. Woo! He's gonna get hit up.
Yeah, they'll be like, oh yeah, dude, totally. Come on down to, let's go golfing in Terrytown or wherever these kids go.
All right, I got one for you. I think I actually told a shorter version of this with Matt Ritter, but so when I was in the 4th grade, so I moved to the town that I grew up in, Edison, New Jersey, and then we moved to Woodcliff Lake in 3rd grade, in the middle of 3rd grade, which, it's kind of tough, move in January. And it was a hard transition. And I kind of found myself glomming onto this kid, Charlie Pfister. I'm using his full name because why not? Pfister. He was, I've Googled him. I can't find him.
Weird.
But he ended up moving away in a year or two later. But, relevant to this story, he lived in this McMansion. And I remember, like, I went over there and he had all the best snacks. His dad was, like, a little older. He drove a boat. And he had, like, a mustache. And the mom was, like, very, like...
drove a boat? He drove a boat.
Like, he had a boat. Like, he was like one of those guys. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm Jewish and, my parents are from Long Island. I never been on a boat,
Fair enough.
And his mom, I remember, felt a little, what I didn't know at the time, I didn't know the term, but like Stepford wivey, but he had the best snacks. Like, they were just plying us with ice cream and chips, and I was like, this is amazing. And he lives in this mansion, and so, I was like his little sidekick, in 3rd grade, because I'm the new kid. And I remember we watched Beavis and Butthead, and that was like huge because I was like, we're allowed. And his mom said, and it was the first time I heard this term, because sometimes when you hear the things for the first time, it just like is burned in your memory. She goes, we never do that. This is a once in a blue moon. And I was like, what is that?
You were looking up like, I wonder when the blue moon will come again.
I just like, and we didn't have Google. I mean, this is like 1994. How old was I? Yeah, 93.
How did people learn the English language before Google?
Amazing. They had these
phrases and idioms.
People used to read books. So anyways, cut to... I'm Charlie Pfister's little buddy, right? Little sidekick doing the bidding of Charlie. And there were a few of us, but I was in the rotation. It's like as if we were like his gang of goons,
Mm-hmm.
And then another new kid moved to town, Joe Ossie. And Joe was like a real sweet, sensitive kid, but like a bigger kid, almost like a linebacker, whatever that is in 4th grade. And Charlie took to teasing him at recess. What did that involve? Chasing him, calling him names, taunting, really. And of course, who would support Charlie but his goons? And what did I know as a 9-year-old but to support this new friend with the great snacks and
the Beavis and Butthead.
If sure. And so we would chase him, and I was just trying to fit in. I'm by the way, a new kid too, going through some stuff at home, And I'll never forget, it must have been December, because the thing that Joe Ossie said that was burned in my brain, like the Blue Moon comment, was, like, you're just keep messing with a kid on Christmas, like around Christmas, and it's just not kind. And like, it blew me away that this 4th grade kid, like, appealed to our sense of like shame and empathy, a thing that used to exist in America. And you know what? Charlie stopped. And then we all stopped. And it's not as if we became all friends that year. But then you know what happened? You know what did happen? Charlie moved. A couple of years went by. And by 7th grade, I was over Joe's house every day in the summer. Like, we formed a band together. He was an incredible musician, Joe. He introduced me to so much music, and then he would be in the pit, and I would be starring in the musicals. But then what happened was junior year, we were double cast as Nicely Nicely in what's that one?
Guys and dolls.
Thank you.
Jesus.
And I was not so nicely to him. I was kind of a little prick because I was this little diva, this little big fish in a small
Are
pond.
you going back to what happened on fourth grade all the way in high school?
Well, no, because we were fourth grade. I was kind of one of his goons bullying him. Then we
All
became
right.
great friends.
Right.
Then I was a dick to him
You
because
reverted.
yeah. Well, because I was just kind of a jerk, whatever. And then we kind of drifted. He actually, I don't know if he still lives in Texas. He's joined a symphony. He's a brilliant French hornist. And cut to, I'm 40, as you know, as I mention pretty much every time we speak. I'll be 41 soon. Watch out. It's going to change. And someone posted something on Facebook about high school or something about friendship, something. And I saw he commented, and I DM'd him a few years ago, and I wrote, hey man, like, I just want to apologize for,
Keep going.
if I, was unkind or kind of a jerk, at the end of high school or, something. And I always regretted it. And
Did you bring up the fourth grade stuff?
no. I mean, that was such ancient history. I don't even know if he would remember that or that I was a part of it because we ended
You
up
did.
becoming really good friends for like 4 or 5 years eventually, but then drifted, right? And you know what he wrote back to me? He goes, "Oh, hey man, I think we just drifted. Like, that just happens." And I was like, "Oh my God. I've been blowing this up in my brain for the last 2 decades of Joe hates me, I was such a," and he's just like, "Yeah, that's just," and I say this because I think that's life. We all have these different perspectives. Sometimes some big incident happens. Sometimes it's just life. We went in different directions. Things changed. He saw it a little bit differently. And I grew. And at the end of the day, that was an important time. It was formative for me. And maybe to some extent for him. And we're not really friends anymore. We're not enemies. But yeah, I say all that because things change. That is a guarantee. If they're not changing, there's probably a glitch in the matrix. I think it's a good thing that friendships change and that life changes. We ride the ride the best we can.
It's really interesting. It's hard because, the moments are the moments, and we ultimately can only share so much in those moments too. But as the years go on, as you reflect, and then you have even any discussion of it, like I was talking about when I connected with these high school friends, some, 12, Jesus, yeah, maybe 12, I don't know, no, 15, 20 years later, who knows? And all of a sudden, like, you hear all this stuff and you realize how many things were assumed and because things weren't said. Like you kind of have something so worked up in the mind, like you do about everything and all things 24/7 all the time. And you've sculpted an entire narrative. I call it the pad over narrative, which is like, it's a long read. It's the definition of TLDR, and then you're like, oh, this is actually not based on the other person's perspective or point of view. Certainly not a French hornist living in Houston or Dallas. And that's where I'm assuming he's out of.
Yeah, I'll Google. I don't know where he is now, but
Yeah. But Pfister, who knows where he is? Hopefully,
I mean,
he might be hearing this.
somebody came up once that was like in the military, but yeah, these mysterious people that pop in and out of your lives that you're like, where are you? And especially in a day like today with the internet, where like you can pretty much find anything. There's people from summer camp I've looked up. I'm like, where are you? How do you have no footprint on the internet? It's amazing. So, all right, let's pivot to some resources for kids, books and guides.
Yeah,
If you have a young kid, I would say ages 3 to 7, the internet recommends the Elephant and Piggy series is great to kind of deal with the themes of friendship and conflict resolution. That's by the brilliant Mo Willems. You must know Mo Willems. Was Heath of an age where you could read those books?
I mean, the name's familiar, but it's not a big lift. Just hearing the words Mo
The
Willems.
Elephant and Piggy series are a lot of fun and
Yeah.
deal with the friendship friendship themes. And then Pip and Posy, which I've never heard of, but apparently they deal with everyday friendship problem solving. And there's also a series called The Sunshine Queens, which is about teamwork, support, and belonging. So these are some recommendations for younger kids. For a little bit older, I'd say like starting to get towards that late elementary, early middle school, you've got the Fix It Friends series, middle grade stories about real issues and social problem solving. You've got Just Jamie, a story that handles changing friend groups and peer pressure. Scholastic recommends that one.
Scholastic classic.
And Stand Up for Yourself and Your Friends. That's the title of a book by Patty Kelly Criswell, A Guide for Interpersonal Skills and Boundary Setting. But wait, there's more. Two books we'd recommend for parents: Helping Your Child with Friendship Problems and Bullying by three authors, Sandra Dunsmore, Jessica Dewey, and Susan Birch. We'll put this in the show notes. It's a research-informed step-by-step guide for parents on supporting kids with peer issues and ensuring developmentally appropriate responses. And then there's this book that they recommend called Odd Girl Out by Rachel Simmons, it's really more geared toward girls and parents of girls, but focusing on social exclusion and kind of how to deal with all those difficult dynamics that often happen between girls at a certain age. So those are some books you might want to look into, or at least, get on Audible or just get the Cliff Notes.
I'd say too, and I don't know, this is coming from someone whose spouse is a therapist and works with kids as well, but I feel like it's as important to check in with your kids about how friendships are going as much as school, as much as academics, as much as I don't know, anything else that you think happens at school. Guess what's happening besides grades and volleyball games is friendships. And I think we've been fortunate, and it was a big push. One of the reasons why we live in Austin, Texas, probably the biggest reason, was an opportunity to go to a school that carried with it a price, but also a small student body and a student-teacher ratio where, frankly, the faculty can keep an eye on kids on more than one level, on a social level as well. And I think it's so important because I know it's something we haven't really touched on when we've talked to dads yet, but we know it's looming and out there, and that is the reality of bullying and cyberbullying and just really just a lot of difficult outcomes that can come from that. So I just think it's important to do lots of check-ins with your kids too. It's really, it's a gift to have a wife as a therapist, a partner as a therapist who can just be like, oh yeah, so what's going on with this? Like she talks. I'll be like, how do you know all this stuff? And she goes, I ask questions and I listen. And I'm like, got it. Hold on. Ask questions, listen. So ask questions and listen.
Good advice for pretty much anything in life.
I know, right? What the hell? What the hell?
Well, here are some key insights that I want to share is about friendship. Kind of just to summarize some of what we've talked about so far is friendship skills develop over time. They're not innate. So just always remember that. It's like you can even atrophy. If you could have a ton of friends, but then you stop being social and stop kind of working that muscle, they can go away. So, it's a practice. As Matt Ritter says, friendship is a practice, and you got to practice all the time, right? Got to get back in that friendship gym, or what age. And I think it's important we teach our kids that. Also, this is interesting. Social rejection actually activates the same regions of the brain as physical pain. And I think oftentimes we tend to underestimate or kind of shoo away, invalidate the whole idea of emotional pain. Oh, you're fine, or oh, no, it hurts, but it's not. But then someone's literally bleeding and you can't ignore it. But, to your brain, it hurts. Hurts, and so I think acknowledging how painful exclusion or just friendship, conflict can be is important, especially because kids can interpret exclusion as meaning something is wrong with them, and nothing is wrong with them. That's just not how that works. This is a complex system. Relationships are complicated. So some key guidelines for these: you never want to minimize the conflict for your kids. You also don't want to catastrophize and say, oh my God, they're never going to have a friend again, or oh my gosh, this friendship is over. Maybe not. You have to kind of let it play out. And you want to also help your kids separate their behavior from their identity, right? Like something happened, but it's not who you are. So it's really important for parents to talk about friendship, like you were saying, like let's model how we want to treat other people, how we treat our friends, and just how we treat others, that it trickles down. So I think we should do what we normally do in these big question episodes and kind of give guidance by age. How does that sound?
Yeah, that's really good.
Okay.
That's a solid approach, I think.
Yeah, we want to help parents understand what's really going on at every age and how to respond in a way that helps, not hurts. So, when your kids are 3 to 5, they're thinking, I just want to play, and why won't they let me play? And so, what's happening? Well, at this age, friendship is not really about loyalty, it's about proximity. Who's close to them? Who do they recognize the most? Kids also can exclude very impulsively. You can't play really doesn't necessarily mean I don't like you or I don't want you around. It might just mean like I'm 3 and I want to be in control, or I'm 3 and I can't regulate my emotions and so I just want to be alone. But they don't necessarily have the words, right? And so it comes out in ways that feel exclusionary when they're not always even meant to be. So what it feels like to the child is they could feel disappointed, they could feel confused, they could feel angry, they could think no one likes me. And parents again sometimes tend to over explain, or oralize and say, well, that child wasn't kind to my child. Well, sometimes your child isn't kind, and that's a normal developmental behavior, right? You don't want to treat it like bullying. They are literally learning how to be people in the world and have relationships. So what could help is, again, always validating your 3-year-old, your 4-year-old, your 5-year-old. These are young kids figuring it all out. You say, that didn't feel good, huh? I can see that. Or you can say, hey, how did that make you feel? Let them tell you. And you want to teach them how to enter play. You almost want to rehearse, hey, go next time, go ask, hey, can I play? Sometimes it's just as easy as setting them up, or giving them an alternative. Hey, maybe you can find another game, or another area to play. So that's for the really young kids. Getting a little older, getting into that kind of first grade territory, first to, third, fourth grade, where we know stuff can happen, where, kids can kind of become highly focused on the rules, the fairness of a situation. It's not fair that I'm being excluded. I'm better friends with this person than them. That doesn't make sense, and kind of dealing with that fallout. Friendship starts to feel less like an accident and more like it's earned. Like, oh, I'm friends with this person because we have this in common or because I worked for it. An exclusion that, as a result, can feel personal. Again, the kids can feel angry and confused and sad, but start to feel embarrassed too and worry that they did something wrong. So, I think something that the experts say that parents sometimes do wrong in these scenarios is trying to fix it for them, calling the other parents, getting involved, calling teachers, trying to kind of micromanage the kids' relationships. They have to figure it out for them, and you can guide. But again, what does help is the validation. Tell your kid, no matter their age, yeah, it hurts. It hurts being left out. That makes sense. And you can still role play. You can still do a script. Hey, if so-and-so says this to you or you hear this comment, how might you want to respond? I would suggest saying this. Off script, my wife often says to our kids, and this is brilliant, she goes, I don't know if Brearley ever does this, she goes, do you want advice or do you just want me to listen?
Yeah, I mean, she tends to lead off with questions. I'm telling you, like the whole ask questions, listen is pretty big, and
Very smart.
not to throw a wrench in what clearly is. I mean, this is a page turner in terms of advice. But one thing that is tricky is when you get into, and this happens in every age group, but there are other parents who don't see it from both perspectives. And I think the way we're approaching this is like, balanced and, let's take a step back. And let's be honest, there are parents out there that like to jump in, they're yelling from the bleachers, yelling at the ref saying, hey, this is unfair. And that adds a complication to it too. I'm not here to really I'm kind of clugging up the machine here a little bit, but there is something to be said about the parents that kind of assume that the fault is not on our side, and
well, I think that's a phenomenon called enabling and infantilizing, but we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk to those parents who do care and see both sides. So
that's
if
true.
you're listening and we haven't scared you away, here's how to talk to your 10 to 12-year-old. What's happening when 10 to 12-year-olds are excluded? Well, now the social hierarchies are full steam ahead. We've got the popular kids. We've got group identity. Exclusion is public. If these kids have phones, there's group chats being formed that they're left out of. It becomes very territorial, becomes almost can feel malicious. There's lunch table drama, there's party drama. How can this manifest for a kid? Well, there's grief. There's actual, grief over lost friendships, real sadness and a real growing internal narrative that something might be wrong with them and deep shame and embarrassment. So I think what helps, again, name the grief. Hey, it hurts to lose a friend. It hurts. There's nothing wrong with just saying what it is. Um, and telling your kids friendships can change no matter the age. They change when you're an adult, they change when you're a kid. That is normal. It doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. And then, encouraging your kids to diversify almost like a portfolio. Diversify your interests and friend groups. Different activities, areas in life mean that you're not so beholden to one particular set of friends or friend. And when stuff happens, as it inevitably does in life, you have other people to lean on, and you always need people to lean on. So that's the 10 to 12 set, the preteen, and when now we're getting into the big bad teen years,
Mm.
probably the most intense, although it's all relative. Friendship is so tightly linked to your identity when you're a teenager that exclusion can make you feel like you're out of place in the world. You don't belong anywhere. Now we're starting to get into kind of rumors territory or silent exclusion. And, shame is really prominent for teens who feel excluded or, like they don't have deep friendships. They could be seen as, they feel like maybe they're unlikable, that they're replaceable, that they're worthless. Again, parents, don't try to solve this for your kids. Listen, do what Brearley does. Ask questions, ask questions, ask questions. Slow down. It's not as urgent as it may seem for your kids. You know this because you're older. You're in your 40s or 50s or 60s. Maybe you're a young parent, maybe you're in your 20s, I don't know. But either way, you've been around the block longer than the kids, and you know this is a long game. This may play out in a week or a month or a year, and you may see things differently. So just slow down. Help the teens evaluate. I think you were kind of saying this earlier, Ollie, like, how does this friendship make you feel? Do you like yourself, when you're with this person? Do you like yourself more? Do you like yourself less? Does this person make you better? Do you make them better? And you can normalize walking away from a friendship if you need to. You don't have to start when you're an adult. If it really makes sense, but you want to make that choice intentionally. And you want to tell your kids that no matter what, belonging is important, but it's not the most important thing. And that your dignity and your self-worth matters more than just belonging to any group. And I think that's, as we've said, a real friendship is one where you can really be yourself. So that's what you do at every age. Thoughts, additions,
I
omissions?
mean, the biggest thing I'd say, and I've experienced this, as we're having it in real time, is, and we are in a unique situation because he's been at the same school, a smaller school group, but for many, many years from kindergarten through eighth grade. And it has been just a boon for him to make new friends through volleyball and just open up the world a little bit. Because I think what happens is, as we know as adults, we've gone off to college, we've left home, we had the whole college thing, and then the post-college thing, and you go, man, there's 12 billion people in the world. Now it's 12. We went from 9 to 12. It's just exploding. Yeah, but they don't know that. Their reality is so much more contained, and I think to find ways to expand it is huge. Is huge. This sounds crazy, but every time I think about this stuff, I think about Bowling for Columbine, the Michael Moore documentary, when they're interviewing Trey Parker and Matt Stone, who are from freaking, like, I think they went to Columbine High School, but I think Littleton, Colorado. And they were like, oh my God, like, if I could talk to these kids, they'd be like, this is nothing. This is just high school. Like, the world's going to move on, and the kid who you thought was like the biggest dork in school is probably going to be a tech millionaire, and like have some model for a wife. Not that that makes that person great or necessarily happy, but the world as you see it now is not how it's going to stay. Whatever hierarchies you see now will change. And we know this through experience. Your kids don't. But I think, it's weird. It's like you can't really tell them that. You want to show them that, and that's what we're seeing now. It's like he does volleyball and he's just with a whole other world of kids. And like, it's crazy, like it's helped him a lot, I think. So really, volleyball's the answer. That's just right that in there.
Get your kids
Volleyball.
in volleyball.
Club volleyball.
All right, we're going to close this out with, as we always do, our toolkit. Today, it's an A through H toolkit. So if you've listened to nothing else and you're fast forwarding to this moment, you're in luck. Here's your toolkit for how to help your kids when they're dealing with issues of friendship exclusion. Tool A, ask before you interpret. You want to ask your kid questions. And this is derived from child-centered therapy models. There's research behind this. Ask, ask, ask. What happened? What did you notice when that happened? Do not ask questions like, why didn't they include you? Just keep it open-ended and try to hear it from their point of view before kind of centering it towards trying to figure it out. Just ask questions. Get all the information you can. That's tool A, ask questions. Tool B, validate the pain before anything else. And this is backed by, lots of research. The, Eisenberger, I guess, is some big scientist in this world, but they say, tell your kids that really hurts. Yeah, that makes sense. Anyone would feel bad in this situation. I understand why you're upset. Tool C, separate identity from experience. This helps counter the shame formation. Again, this is who you are, is not what you're going through. Say things like, they didn't include you today. Do not say things like, they don't like you. Let your kid feel like they are worthy, regardless of the behaviors that they're dealing with. Tool D, normalize it, but don't dismiss it, the exclusion. Tell your kids, most kids go through this at some point. It's really common. But don't say, it's no big deal. It is a big deal to them. Tell them, but it's normal. It's something people go through, being excluded. Tool E, teach friendship skills explicitly. You want to teach social skills from a young age. You want your kids to practice. It sounds weird, but have them practice entering play. If they're really little, like we said before, ask, hey, can I play with you? If they're older, come up with like, oh, what are you into? Maybe we can go do something together. Figure out, help them read social cues. That's really important. I think sometimes a lot of difficulty comes from people having an inability to read the social cues when maybe they could have bailed on a situation earlier if they got a vibe that we're just not clicking. That's okay. That's normal. You don't have to click with everybody, but empower your children, set them up for success. Let them understand what those, things said and unsaid mean. And focus on how and not why. How to befriend someone, how to be a good friend, how to support someone, how to ask for support. And don't worry about the why. The why, it's all relative. Tool F, role play rejection. When you practice being rejected, it doesn't quite sting as much. You've already kind of rehearsed. If someone says they don't want to hang with you or don't want to play with you, you want your kids to be armed with a response like, okay, I understand, or okay, sounds good, no problem, or maybe later, and figure out how to process that in a way that doesn't cause immense confusion, anger. Again, these emotions are okay, but you want to be able to self-regulate and deal with them in a healthy way. And also teach your kids that rejection is survival. Rejection is not the end of the story. It's the end of maybe this chapter, and maybe that chapter is just really short. Maybe it's one page, one paragraph. Tool G, monitor patterns, not moments. So we talked about this. There's a difference between a one-off incident or incidents every now and then and real patterns of exclusion and, what could veer into bullying or harassment. If you do see patterns of exclusion, you may want to get the teachers involved or school support or caregivers just to make them aware that this behavior is ongoing because it could be really detrimental to a kid. But if it's a one-off situation, you also don't want to blow it up into something that it might not be because again, that's normal. That's healthy. Conflict happens. Mistakes happen. People aren't always kind. All of us. And so empowering your kids to learn how to deal with that from a young age is going to make them so much better equipped to handle it when they're older. And the final tool, tool H in our toolkit for handling friendship exclusion with your kids, anchor belonging at home. And this just goes right back to attachment theory. You tell your kids, You don't have to earn your place here. You belong here. You are always safe here. You can show your true self here at home, and you're welcome. And whatever you want to do and say, as long as it's safe and healthy and not illegal, is totally cool. And we will support you. But you can always feel like this is your home base. And if you have to put some masks on or code switch as you're figuring out this very complicated and messy world of friendship and social relationships, you don't got to do that here. You're cool. This is your place. This is your home. That's Tool H. And that is the toolkit.
That's a lot of tools.
Right? Yeah.
That's a lot of tools. I will tell you, that was one thing. I love H a lot. I gotta tell you, H hits home because I'm staring at an anime poster right now. Why is that in my office and not in Heath's room? There was a moment where he felt like he needed to not watch anime or like hide part of who he was. Like, it was kind of tied into us kind of wanting him to maybe ease up on video gaming, but he's really into that stuff more so than his friends, and it kind of triggered something where he was like, oh, no one wants me to do this. My parents don't want me to do it. My friends don't want me to do it. And he just wanted to kind of like get the stuff out of there, and really was like, no. You need to be able to be yourself at home. You need this place to be how you really want to be. And I think that is so important. I never even thought about it that way, but I think it is so true. Like, it's hard to express yourself like fully amongst your peers, but home should be a safe space for that. So, Tool H, it's a good one. It's a good tool.
Well, hey, thanks for being my friend, Holly.
Yeah. Let's do this more often. Let's not let another year or two go by. It's kind of crazy, but yes, through this podcast, we have essentially, really, let's call it, developed a friendship. You know what I mean?
Bingo.
It's crazy.
Bingo.
And it really helps unpack the very first interaction I ever had with you, which is when you showed up on set and you're like, hey, listen, if this thing doesn't work out, don't worry about it. They may not figure it out. And I was like, what? What's going on? This thing's going.
I got loose lips, man. But hey.
No, it's classic Neil. You're like, hey, it's like the old C-section. I mean, is that a surgery?
Hey,
is
now.
that a surgery? Classic. It all makes sense after a while.
Yeah.
It all makes sense.
Soon.
Well, yeah, it's been great to broadcast here from heaven. So just so you know, as we move into this time of year in the afternoon, I'm realizing it's a sunny day here in Austin, which is why I'm inundated with this light. But yeah, no, it's nice to be up here in the clouds. Yeah. All right.